Welcome everyone to What the Force and our latest episode of Once Upon a Time in the Outer Rim, covering Chapter 13 of The Mandalorian, The Jedi. And with me to cover this episode and all episodes of Season 2 is Ty Black.
Hello, hello, hello. Chapter 13.
Hello. This was a very anticipated episode. We could tell right away as soon as we found out that this was going to be written and directed by Dave Filoni, who is the creator of Clone Wars, Rebels, and is in charge of the entire animation department and much of the future of Star Wars at Lucasfilm, that this was going to be a very anticipated episode. And, you know, there's a lot of emotions and it's very complex for many people out there on the internet. Some people were very, very excited. Some people had, you know, very odd reactions, not odd, but, you know, very strong reactions to what they saw on screen. And I don't even think it was that controversial of an episode. It just evoked those kind of emotions because of the miasma of everything around both the character and the actress playing her. And I just want to say all feelings are valid here. Mm-hmm. We just intend to analyze this episode on this podcast. In general, trans rights are human rights. And if you're transphobe, you suck.
That was a beautiful, eloquent way of saying that.
Yeah, I mean, grow up. You know?
No, I agree.
I don't know what to tell you. This show, Once Upon a Time in the Outer Rim, has been looking at especially The Mandalorian from a connotative lens, thinking about it from a mythic and genre-specific perspective. And so, you know, we named it Once Upon a Time in the Outer Rim. And this season has been less Western, typically, than just like broad strokes, feeling of Western, you know, certain movements, certain shots, etc. This episode itself had the most Western elements, so I might wax a little bit on it and talk a little bit about the cycle of creativity with Westerns and with elsewhere in the world, like Italian cinema and Japanese cinema that ended up being created during sort of the heyday of the golden age of Hollywood, which you know, we end up getting Kurosawa and we end up getting Sergio Leone influencing and then back influencing creators like John Ford, etc. So I might wax a little bit on that a little bit because I think it's really important to understand how these two genres, samurai, especially films, the influences from Italy and the spaghetti westerns that Sergio Leone brought in. And how that all kind of it was like a transformational works that ended up a cycle that ended up happening, and it definitely you could see how they interplay in this episode. So I might go on to that a little bit. Just as a reminder, to keep up with this and all What the Force episodes, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or your podcast app of choice. It helps people find the show, especially yourself, when the new episodes arrive. Thank you. This will be a big spoiler episode. We might get into our personal thoughts and feelings. All of your feelings about the episode are, of course, very valid, but we might, of course, go into ours as well. With that, Ty, do you want to go into the summary?
Yeah, sure. This was very hard for me to write the summary for this episode for many reasons, but I think I did a pretty good job in summarizing, so here goes. We begin the episode on Corvus, where we witness Ahsoka Tano taking down numerous foes with her 2 white sabers. Ahsoka arrives at the town gates and demands information from the town's magistrate. Ahsoka gives her 1 day or the magistrate will suffer the consequences. When Din Djarin then arrives to the town, he is given an audience with the magistrate, who has prisoners lined up in electric cages outside of her palace. The magistrate offers Din a Beskar spear if he will kill Ahsoka. When Din finally finds her, Ahsoka is able to read the child's mind, and we learn that the child's name is Grogu, and he was once kidnapped from the Jedi Temple long before Din found him. Ahsoka tests the child for his Force abilities, and Din is able to get him to play a game of catch to prove his Force abilities. Ahsoka determines that since Grogu has anger and attachment problems, she cannot train him. Din attempts to assist Ahsoka in exchange for training Grogu, and the two successfully take on the magistrate and her guards. Ahsoka has a final showdown with the magistrate and wins the Beskar spear, which she gifts to Din. But Ahsoka still refuses to train Grogu, and tells Din he must travel to a Jedi Temple ruin on Tython, where if Grogu reaches out with the Force, a Jedi might go to him and train him.
Yep, that's what happens.
That is what happens. It's very, 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 very strange compared to... And I do want to say that, like, I know we're going to get into thoughts and feelings right now, and I want to say, like, right off the bat, the structure of this episode and just the, like, what it does for the story is very much out of tune with the rest of the episodes. And, you know, we've talked about filler episodes, and we talked about how, you know, video gamey episodes where it's like a fetch quest or something like that, and how they work and how they don't work. And I felt like this episode just wasn't any of that. It felt so different than everything else. And I think that's why there's so many disagreements being had on, like, how and why this worked or didn't work on so many levels. It's just so unfamiliar to us because the whole structure is so different.
Yeah, it is a very unfamiliar structure. It also tries to plug into some things to do with samurai movies and the samurai genre and the feel of samurai. And we're going to get into that in the genre area a little bit more. But it's not quite successful because of some, like, logical caveats to do with samurai and why especially Ronin, which are masterless samurai, which is what we are presented with in an Ahsoka, in this episode, like, it's missing some of the caveats or some of the qualifications of a Ronin samurai that you would expect to see in a genre movie like this. And so without the meat, without the context, without the potatoes even, without all of those carbs that make the story more fulfilling, to me and to Ty, it feels a little odd. And, like, me personally, I actually stayed up because I wanted to have a good understanding of what this episode was going to be like, kind of walking into today as we're recording on Friday night. I watched it and was very confused after. And it took me, like, the whole day to come to even some sort of feeling of semblance of being able to record this episode.
Yeah. I mean, my reaction was a lot more hostile, but
I don't tend to react super hostilely to narrative. I just
you don't
try to figure it out. It's like a puzzle I've got to solve, and I'm like, okay, what are they trying to say? Why don't I understand it? Is it because I'm not sitting in the lens or the place of the person that this is meant for? But the reactions online are so disparate and so confusing, and so, like, people are like, it's muddled, or they're like, it was amazing, and there's a lot of, like, mixed reactions to this episode. And I think it's because, like, it lost its center a little bit, and so it's not going to feel more universally loved.
Yeah, that's a really good way of kind of just A good overall feeling. Yeah, good summarization.
Yeah, and I do want to say, if you love this episode, if you were like super confused or hated this episode or struggled with this episode, like all feelings are valid. It is fiction and it is meant to cause dialogue, right? Like it's not a bad thing if it didn't work for us and we can discuss it. It's not a bad thing if it did work for us and we can discuss it. But, you know, I beg of everyone, discuss civilly, right? Like that's part of this. It's like, well, why didn't it work for you? Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, why did it work for you? Okay, that's really interesting, you know? And that's what I'm trying to discover is like, is my lens wrong for how I'm viewing this episode?
Yeah.
Right? And what is the lens that is meant to be viewing this episode? And I have yet to find other than, hey, I like fun, but there's all this symbolism. So it is meant for somebody who's looking for it, right?
Yeah.
But it didn't quite land for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that I hated the episode. I certainly didn't. I enjoyed watching it. It's just there's things that like pick at my brain a little bit. And I can't get past them. Stuff to do with replacing Ashley Eckstein with Rosario Dawson, you know, like just having a POC person replace a white person, like, not a problem for me. Replacing actors in new forms, anything to do with the Leiko being too long. Like, yeah, it was a little off-putting for me, or too short. Her like tendrils next to her head, if you don't know what Leiku are. Anything to do with that is like, well, you know, they had to make choices to do with the production because of the stunts that were involved.
You can forgive all of that.
I can forgive everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can forgive a lot of stuff. Like I thought that there's a scene that happened a little bit later, like when Ahsoka and I still cannot believe that's Ahsoka. When Ahsoka and Din were walking towards the city and her Leiku were, obviously it was like a scene, I guess they filmed it a little bit later in the filming because you could tell because her Leiku were like bent. They had like creases in them in a way that was odd, and it took me out of it so hard. And I don't typically... I'm not typically affected by that sort of thing. Like I don't usually let those tiny things get to me, but it was a detail that I just didn't like. And I think it was just on top of the fact that the dialogue and the plot line were just so incredibly lackluster for me that I was starting to hyperfixate on the details.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens when you're bored.
Or you're frustrated with something else in the plot. You end up hyperfixating, or you know, if something else in the story, something's not working for you. You're not brought into the universe, and so you end up being pulled out of it, and then you're hyperfixating on different aspects of it. So,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean that happened with me and Tross, right? Like. It didn't work on a variety of levels for me. And so I ended up hyperfixating on the weirdest stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like the musical cues being butchered. I know every musical cue and how it was cut wrong. Like I hyper-focused on that. And, you know, that's just how our brains work. It's a coping mechanism for when we're like trying to enjoy something when we're not. You're like trying to find something. But this episode, like generally speaking, how it was shot, the scenes themselves, like if you, there's several moments in this episode where like Ahsoka would freeze and like hold a pose, and it's like, that's screensaver worthy. You know, like the moment when she's holding the child, which we will go into his new name, his name he has had for many years, but couldn't speak it out loud. When she's holding the child in her arms in front of the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like between the lantern between them. You know, like she jumps up to one of the areas and then freezes with her lightsabers in front of her. Like there's so many moments that are like, yes, this was beautiful. This was a really cool shot, or this was really interesting. My favorite shot of the whole show is actually when Din goes out to try and find Ahsoka, and you get the shot of the like burned mountains, like the burned hills, and like they're different shades each hill. That happens actually in Canada. Like the foothills look different shades in the setting sun.
Right. That makes sense.
It's just, it was a really cool detail and really beautiful. And the castle seemed cool and the environment seemed polluted and, you know, much to the symbolism of the mines that we had gone into previously. We get a lot of that out of this episode. It's very nature versus, nature versus industrial. And we'll go into that kind of in the symbology and symbolism part of this episode. But yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of stuff that felt like it was calling to different types of media that we know that like Filoni and Favreau have connections to or have like, you know, soft spots for or something like that.
Yeah, very samurai, very Western at times. Princess Mononoke. There's a lot of Avatar: The Last Airbender feel.
Yes,
you know,
very much so.
Which, of course, Dave Filoni was one of the creatives on for the first season, so that makes sense, right? Like, there's a lot of that.
Yeah,
yeah.
Without the story meat.
Yeah,
that was needed, and that's the problem. Yeah, but yeah, we'll get into that.
I did like all of the kind of secondary characters, other than like we'll go into Ahsoka in a moment, but the secondary characters. You know, we had Lang, who was the hired gun of the fortress or the city or whatever. Michael Biehn, I think is his name. He's most famously from Aliens, or Alien, one of the two. I've seen them once. I didn't really recognize him, but I did see that lots of people were commenting and very happy to see him. Diana Lee Inosanto. She is actually, her father is a very famous martial artist who was a disciple of Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee is her godfather. So kind of that stream of like martial arts. And so she is a very talented martial artist, and actually was a stunt double. What I recognized her from, like when I was going through her Wikipedia, was, oh yes, she worked on like Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a stunt double, and she's done stunts and is a martial artist. And so it was nice to see a person who was a skilled martial artist also being an acting role. I thought that was really cool. And then we had Wing Tao Chow, who was the sort of villager or the city person, the townsfolk person who helped him rescue the prisoners, and also became the like person in charge at the end. They just kept his name. His name is Governor Wing in IMDb. So it's just cool. Shout out to all the Caledon City secondary people.
Yeah,
you awesome.
There was some really cool, I think, world building that was happening in this episode that I really, really, really liked. And I thought,
I liked that we saw children again. We saw several children in the city. You know, they were suffering too.
Yeah, exactly. They were suffering too. That was a big part of it for me that I thought was really important. Was like, that inclusion of children, but then saying that they can be a part of the kind of rebirth of a city. And like also the idea of a different aesthetic of that kind of city. Like there's a different inspiration that went into the city compared to, you know, plenty of other Star Wars towns.
Yeah. It was unique. It felt different. They brought in some of the like similar features, like the archway thing that held the bell that they, or the gong that they
that was very Star Wars. That arch is like, if you noticed, the arch that is now over Navarro is almost like so similar. It's so similar.
And that's from the Force Awakens like visual, like or art of book. I think like that's where they saw it, and I think they might have taken that from a Ralph McQuarrie drawing at some point. Like it's like there's a visual language that they've grown and drawn in here, and I appreciate it. I even liked the round building. I thought it was really cool. Where the governor lived, the governor's mansion palace thing,
taken like right out of it was that rotunda style Chinese palace type of thing. It was like a Chinese temple, I think is what it's based off of.
Yeah, and it also looked like the gardens themselves looked very oriental in design, or like a Buddhist garden, or like there was almost like black koi that she was feeding too at that one point. So like I really liked all those influences and adding all of that in.
I want to see more of that. I'm glad they've added that now to the lore so they can play with it if they want to. Yeah.
And that they made her like magically, when you walk through her gate, her house didn't have smog. It was like like this is something that literally happens in like places in the world that actually have a lot of air pollution. They have a way to get the air pollution out of the air for temporarily, right? Like they spray it with this stuff that basically knocks it all out of the air, and then it clears up the skies. And it's like they've done that just for her house.
Right. Well, and there was also the idea that she has got plants, like she has water, she has an ecosystem. Which is something that I guess she's not willing to nurture in the city. And that also takes care of smog, typically, is if you have like a lot of plants, a lot of vegetation, some kind of ecosystem that kind of feeds on that pollution in a way. And so, that was really interesting.
It was very jarring to see the dichotomy of this very lush and lively area full of life garden in amidst all of this death, where like the animals are literally like trying to eat trees because there's no more leaves left.
Right. I like that. Some of that stuff, again, like I wish some of that would have been a little more teased out. Like I don't really know what the magistrate did for her money, for her success, for her, for the loyalty. I don't know. I don't think.
She built weapons for the Empire.
But what kind of weapons was it?
It wasn't clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't know like what it took, or like what her people were doing as far as labor or mining or anything. I'm not entirely sure exactly what torture she was putting her people under.
Well, we know that they had burnt the forest for some reason,
but they burnt it without using the fuel from the timber. So that was really strange.
Yeah, there was a lot of like, okay,
or it was just like polluted.
It could have been. I mean, from space, it looked like there was like a lava flow too. Like it didn't really. There was a lot of like confusing messaging as far as like what this planet was all about. But the clear thing that we can see is that there was industrialization, and it had taken away and eroded the nature around them.
Right.
There was a cool concept art where it looked like the child had grown a plant. And I was like, that's cool.
Was that at the end of the episode? I totally missed that. Totally missed that.
So it's like they're like the ground was all like ashen or whatever, and there's and Baby Yoda's hand is outstretched, and there's a little plant.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing that one now. I was confused as to what that was trying to show, but that makes more sense. There were some other things in the concept art that I thought, oh, they didn't execute that. I don't know why they didn't execute that.
Yeah.
It was very strange.
Well, and some of the concept art was like, like Ahsoka looked very different in different ways. Like it was Ahsoka wearing her white garbs, but this was very purposefully not Ahsoka wearing white garbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was very strange. I noticed that too. She was much more of a wizard in the concept art. And then I guess Dave came back and was like, no, she has to be gray. Mm-hmm. Which is fine, but like, oh and then, my God.
Like some of the concept art fully went like kendo type. Like her pants were like very long and kendo like garb. So that was interesting too. It's like, where did they go with who she is at this moment and, you know, what she represents? So let's get into Ahsoka.
Yeah. It makes me think like maybe not everyone was on the same page with where she was. Like, if even though Dave directed this and wrote this, I have a very strong feeling that not everyone understood exactly what was supposed to be going on with her, where she was, why she was important to the story. Because if they did, like, people would have questioned it. People would have said, okay, well, why does she have to be in this story? And they would have pushed him to probably challenge a little bit more of that, like kind of tease these storylines out. Okay, like there's so much conflict
unless she's Falstaff.
Well, that's a completely different purpose of a character, right?
I mean, just like the Queen's favorite.
As in, like, Filoni's the queen, and she demands that Falstaff be in everything because that's her favorite character.
Yes. Like, just dropping the sick Shakespearean references. I mean,
I do appreciate it. But, like, it's really funny because if I start thinking about it like that, I'm going to love it. It's really funny.
Well, there you go.
It would work. It would actually work if she were a comedic character or if she provided some kind of like exhale.
Yeah.
You know?
Insight or break mentally.
Yeah.
The most comedic character that we've had has been Mithril this season, I think.
Yeah.
Who was very self-deprecating and also very funny about his indentured servitude. Yep.
And he almost like broke the fourth wall sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like he provided like some kind of poetic irony to everything.
Yes.
And now you have somebody who is presented to the story without any it's not self-aware. It's not self-aware even in the slightest. Because like, who are you playing to? Are you playing to the people that know her? Are you playing to the people that don't know her? And this,
or are you trying to do both and make everybody happy and thus failing?
Wow. Where have I heard that before?
Where have I heard that before? You just need to choose.
Just lean into something. You had so much to play with and you chose not to play with anything. Like the play between the Jedi and the Mandalorians, the play between...
Oh, we're going to get into that.
Oh, yeah, we're going to get into all of it. There's so many things that you can play with, and you choose not to do that. Because...
Yeah, there was no conflict. We wanted conflict. And, you know, again, we're not disappointed because our dreams didn't happen or whatever, but conflict helps define characters, right?
Right.
So... Din himself needs things internally to struggle with. And in this episode, Ahsoka doesn't conflict him at all. She orders him about a little bit, but he is very, he himself doesn't fight with her at all. He's like, okay, boss. Yep, boss. I'm here to help. Yep. And it's not like I have a problem with that, like him being subservient almost to Ahsoka because she's a powerful, like, sorceress. Mm-hmm. But there was no pushing of him. There was no poking of him. She's not a crone. She's not a sage. She doesn't test him in a playful manner like Yoda does. Right. She doesn't poke at him in a knowing I know the world manner. She herself is lost. And I'm going to go into that in detail later.
Yeah. Yeah, because, like, typically these types of characters that would show the hero on their path or, like, redirect them towards towards the correct path.
A guide, a mentor, somebody who gives you a piece of information, you know, you're given it by somebody who is fulfilling a sage or a crone-like role.
And that's typically, like, not what the hero was expecting. Yeah. And I feel like when Bo-Katan told Din, go here, you'll find this Jedi, he went there and he found exactly...
Oh, yeah.
He found what he was expecting, right? Like,
yeah. He
found a Jedi.
Yeah, whereas, like, you think, okay, so conversely, where we see a sage character literally in the saga is when Obi-Wan is like, go and find Yoda. He is a great Jedi master who trained me. The great Jedi master who trained me. And he goes and he's like, who are you, little green man? Right?
Exactly. It's always unexpected. Just like with Rey showing up to the island with Luke.
Yeah.
Is unexpected. She didn't expect to find somebody who was now
sad.
He didn't want anything to do with the Jedi. No, I'm not going to train you. Throws a lightsaber over his shoulder. That's what you're supposed to find at that point in your journey. You're supposed to be.
It's either like a trickster or a crone who's like, I'm going to test you. And yes, she did test him in a way, but it wasn't. It ended up not being that way. And there's a few reasons why. And it's because Ahsoka herself is not the crone. She has a different role from an archetypical perspective, and that they didn't butt heads like you would expect to see in an alliance situation like that, or they didn't challenge each other and there was no conflict. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's fine. She gave him the message and the information, but many people have pointed out, well, it could have been any Jedi. There is like one caveat to that, which is that she understands the fear of loss of those that you are attached to. And there is something that Ahsoka takes away from the conversation in that when she speaks with our newly named Grogu. What do you think of the name before we get into this moment?
Oh, I love it. I thought it was perfect. I had no issue with it.
So, like, some people are like, what? Grogurt? Like, but I'm like, you know what? People used to call Yoda yogurt. So it works. He's Grogurt, and that's okay.
I have like a tiny little mythic thing to add later about it. So there is meaning there that I really like. So, yeah. I
feel like George came to set, held baby Yoda, and was like, his name is Grogu. No, I'm serious. Right?
It's so funny because I can literally see that happening.
Like that picture of like the weird shaky blurry one that Jon Favreau took of George Lucas visiting set, holding baby Yoda. He's like, his name is Grogu. And like Dave would have been like, yes, his name is Grogu. Of course.
Yeah.
Right? It feels so much like a George name. And like, I can't hate it at all. Like, it's so weird and so like unique. Oddly, it's not trademarked yet.
Ooh, interesting.
I checked because I checked these things.
Wow. That's really interesting.
They probably didn't want to give it away, but I expect it to probably be submitted for trademark in the next little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so the moment when Ahsoka's like, this is Grogu, and Din's like, Grogu, and Baby Yoda's like, Rah? like, oh my God, you said my name. You know me. But she goes into him being attached to Din, and that, you know, she knows where this leads, and she can't be the one to train him. Okay, let's talk about Star Wars. Ahsoka Tano is afraid. Ahsoka Tano is mad at herself, and she hates what has happened to the people that she has loved most in the world.
Yeah.
She is suffering from all of the things that she says Grogu is suffering from.
Yeah.
She sees herself in Grogu. That's what's happening in that scene. She looks into his eyes, and remember, the eyes are the windows to the soul, and you actually only see yourself. It's projection. This is what's happening.
Yeah.
And yes, she remembers all of the things that Anakin was and how he fell down because of the attachment. But she understands that it was also because Anakin was originally separated, the original sin of Star Wars, separated from his mother. Right. And in a weird way, this is a healing of that original sin, keeping Din and Mando and Din and Grogu together. Mm-hmm. Right? Important. There's this really amazing part of some of the commentary from 2004 on Return of the Jedi, where George points out that the Emperor is just trying to make Luke angry in the throne room, because as soon as he knows that Luke is angry, he knows he has won. Ahsoka is lost in this episode, and she knows her limits. She knows she can't train him, because if she wasn't afraid, if she didn't hold hate for herself and hate for others and what had happened to the universe, and is suffering herself in what she is willing to do, she would have been even willing to join Grogu and Mando and keep them together and still train him.
Yeah.
But she has other concerns, and you don't know that unless you've seen so much more of the show. And I don't know that it's clear for everybody. Maybe it is, but I think that this lens is a really important one, and maybe it didn't come out as well for others, but Ahsoka is not the type to fall back on old teachings unless she was trying to scare him away because of her own fear.
Yeah, I think that's really what bothers me so much about this is, like, I'm not the general audience, but I'm also not an avid, like, Clone Wars Rebels watcher. Mm-hmm. So, like, I casually watched Clone Wars, and, like, a lot of the stuff I don't really remember very well. So, you know, I know Ahsoka. I know what she stands for. I know what she's there for. I know what her breaking away from the Jedi meant. And I believed I knew where she was at this particular point in the timeline. But, you know, that's being challenged. And from what I've seen, that even challenged the most avid Clone Wars watchers.
Yeah.
So,
and you know what? I'm okay with her being wherever they want to put her as far as like a regression or, you know, feeling down on herself or being lost. I'm looking forward to her fighting a Balrog. Right? Because, like, it's when you're darkest that you have the fight of your life. You fall to the pits of hell, and then you rise back up.
But they have to provide that context for us. Like, I think that's my point here is, like, even as somebody that understands, even as somebody that knows a little more than what the general audience understands, like, I was provided no context to where Ahsoka was emotionally or, like, even at all in her journey. So I don't know what she wants.
Yeah, they could have had an extra scene, a quieter moment where she spent, and they used to do this all the time in Rebels, so I'm not sure why they chose not to. Mm-hmm. Like, she answered a holo. She talked to herself in the forest. She talked to, there wasn't a Morai in this episode, but there was a Conver. There was the owl creature.
Right.
But it wasn't Morai, which is her special force owl that's actually an avatar of, you know, the light side of the force.
Right.
I said that very fast.
Yeah.
But, you know, she could have had a quiet moment where she was not in the eyes of anyone else.
Right.
You know, where they showed this context of where she was at.
She could have been talking to, like, she could have been talking to a Jedi of the past. She could have been
like, meditated and said something to herself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She could have been like talking to the Jedi in a meditation and we couldn't see them or whatever. Like, there are 1,000 different ways that we could have gotten some kind of context. We could have gotten flashbacks even.
I mean, like, they used a lot of, like, name dropping in this episode, and anything like, I've got to find Ezra, or, you know, something, or like, I can never make it up to them, or, you know, something emotional that would have shown us a little bit more of the context of where she was at mentally, I think would have endeared her more as well to the general audience and said, oh yes, we need to go and seek out this other information to know this entire person's backstory because she is interesting. And I don't know that that's the case. I don't think they were successful in that.
Yeah. A lot of it reminds me of, I know this is kind of random, but like, you know how like in Mad Max Fury Road, how Max like has these flashbacks to, there's like this little girl that he has to save or something like that he ended up not saving. It's very clear from very minimal flashbacks that he failed her and he didn't save her. Therefore, he is reluctant to get involved.
Ah, yes. Any of that sort of context, and there are a handful of card tricks that writers can use to produce that.
That's what I'm saying, is like, that was so minimal. I remember when I went back and I tried to go back and find like the context for this little girl that I had somehow existed in the previous lore, and she didn't exist in the previous lore, because the whole point was that Max always gets involved, and then obviously this is not the same character as the previous stories, right? That's something else I learned. But like, you know, this character did not exist prior. Somehow with these little flashbacks, they provided depth for a character that went beyond just this one film. And it didn't actually tell us very much at all, right?
All bones, no meat? When have I said that before?
Tross.
I know. And I don't like to make that comparison for this episode because it's nowhere near what happened with Tross for me personally, as far as like what it was, but it lacked the meat. The meat was all with Din and with Grogu, because we care about that relationship, and that relationship was the thing that we needed to care about in this episode. Yes, absolutely. But any sort of context that allowed us to understand this very stoic and opinionated Jedi, because we don't learn that she isn't one in this episode.
Yeah.
Which is odd, right? Yeah. Which is odd. Anything, you know, that would have allowed us to understand where she is at and to seek out more, or to learn more about her, would have helped. Not just for me, a avid watcher / commentator, but for everybody, a new reader, a new watcher, a new, you know, somebody who, like you, is kind of a medium watcher as far as the cartoons go. Any sort of context would have helped us understand, and would have maybe said, yes, push, understand more, show and express interest. Yeah.
And like, trust your audience, right? Like, trust your audience to like get it. Like, provide context. Like, don't think it's too confusing, because like, you're saying, oh, Din's gonna go find a Jedi, but she's not really a Jedi. I'm sure they had this conversation around the writer's table. And I'm sure they probably said, you know, like, oh, well, we don't want to confuse audiences and say that she's not a Jedi.
You know what?
Like, you already confused us.
Yeah. Obi-Wan was like, you know, I fought with your father in the Clone Wars. He fought Darth Vader because he was an old apprentice of his that turned to evil. Just say stuff. And literally, it's there. People will just go with it. There doesn't need to be a backstory to what she was doing. Just say something and give us some meat. And it's not
something.
Yeah, it'll give us emotional weight to the story. Yeah. It doesn't like, I was hanging out with my girlfriend for the past 6 years, and you know what? I just realized that these two crazy kids that I was really, you know, super invested in their outcomes, this one kid, he like rode a space whale, a purgle, out to the outer rim, and I have no idea where he is, and now I gotta find him because I woke up one day. Like, give us that. That would have been amazing.
And like the general audience doesn't need to know anything because it doesn't matter. It's a fairy tale.
Yeah, it's just a point. It's just saying, like, throw these threads out there. It's more sand to the sandbox.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and it also means that you believe in them, right?
Yeah.
That's something that bothers me so much, is like you have all of these threads you can tug on, all of these things you can throw in there, and yet you're unwilling to use them? Then, like, what's the point?
Yeah. There's a lot of fear, not only in Ahsoka, in Grogu, in Din, but in our creators as well, I suspect. And
the meta.
In the meta, there's some fear because I just don't think that they want to get it wrong. And, my sincerest wish is always for them to be brave, make it weird, make it fantastical, make it a fairy tale, make it feel like it's magical from its core,
Yeah, and don't be afraid of the mouse.
You mean when the Empire took over, he disappeared for a while and then it became dark and he doesn't remember much of what happened?
I feel like you're trying to give me some kind of meta here.
It's what Ahsoka says that Grogu remembers.
Right. Are you saying that's a parallel with the mouse?
I don't know. What are you saying? No, it's interesting. Okay. The sound design.
I wanted to say something about like the fact that that there was many moments in this episode that had like dead silence.
Oh yeah. And like
no music,
zero and like very minimal action, so there wasn't much sound design filling the space because it was a dead forest.
And not just in the forest. So when they go into the town, when Din and Ahsoka go into the town, there's all this build-up and there's music in the build-up. And then all of a sudden, it's like dead quiet for like the entire showdown, which I typically would tend to appreciate. But for me, there was no emotional weight to any of the scenes because like Din was facing off with like the guard guy in the town. And then like, and then, like, Ahsoka and the magistrate were fighting. And you would think that because they're in the middle of a town, a lively industrial town, that there would be some sort of noise in the background. Like, something. Like, just white noise. There was nothing. And it was completely quiet, and it didn't make any sense to me. And that continued on up until they left with the spear, because that's when the musical note chimed in with that very like medieval sounding theme, where it was like, the main Mando theme with the...
Yeah, so it was the main Mando theme. Like, he left with the spear to go fetch the child, and the Governor Wing came out with his new cloak, fastening it, and went to speak to Ahsoka. And the Mando theme turned into almost like source music, where it was like a festival type, celebration type.
Like, it's like a music. Renaissance festival.
It was like Ren Fair. Yeah, like that was very cool music, but it was very silent before that. It was odd. Yeah, no, I agree.
Like, shockingly quiet. It really like concerned me because like there was so much dead like moments. Like there were so many dead moments. When I went back and I watched it a second time, I double checked on some of the moments that really landed badly for me, and I like double checked to make sure that I saw what I saw, which was that it was very quiet and like it was just like a lot of looking and not a lot of doing. And I was right. Like To have those moments and to not have any sound design around them, it just made it even worse. And I'm like,
except for the clink and or at least some emotional music. And maybe that was the problem, that it didn't carry those scenes with the emotionality.
I really just think like Filoni watched this with a completely different mind, and because he said it worked, because he said that he liked it, people just went along with it, you know? I don't know. That's a very, very much like, that's a very subjective opinion, but
yeah, I don't know.
No idea.
Odd choice, pointing it out.
Yep.
I think it's really, really dope that Beskar can block lightsabers.
Yeah. I always like that. I think that's a really cool thing.
I'm going to go into the symbolism in a little bit, but I think it's a great ad. I think it makes total sense thematically for the larger meta plot of the former Mandalorian War, as well as upcoming conflicts that might happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Genre.
I also love that he got a spear made out of Beskar, because spears are dope.
Totally.
All right, so moving on to genre, there was a lot of Kurosawa samurai vibes. I think like we saw it directly in the concept art, like how samurai, some of the moments are. Samurai typically carry a shorter sword and a longer sword. So having Ahsoka have two swords is really cool. And she actually used to, when she was much younger, have a shorter sword and a longer sword. So that's kind of cool, right? We also get a lot of the vibe of her being a Ronin, like a lone samurai. And, that's kind of covered in a lot of the sort of genre of that time, right? Dealing with that sort of stuff through Kurosawa, etc. Kurosawa himself was very much influenced by John Ford. John Ford was also back influenced by Kurosawa. So it became this like interesting cycle of conversations, right? So we had like the Magnificent Seven and Seven Samurai, which are sort of plays on each other. These like transformational, trans-Pacific works. Sergio Leone also was influenced by by Westerns and was influenced by Kurosawa. So it's like this ongoing kind of flow of conversation of these different genres communicating with each other and almost having conversations through the transformations that they are having. And honestly, transformational works create incredibly amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So Once Upon a Time in the West, which is one of the influences for the name of the show, has several of these moments where there's like a showdown. There's the tumbleweed. There's also, the kind of showdown at high noon trope that keeps on coming up. Like when Fistful of Dollars kind of like, he shows up and he's got the poncho on. That's the kind of look that Ahsoka has as she's entering the town, the city. Same with Din, in his like standoff against Lang, the hired gun for the city, where he's like kind of almost touching his revolver, and Lang is like, I'm going to shoot you with my rifle. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to drop my rifle and pull my gun. And so like, as he's like starting to put down his rifle, I'm like, to my husband, Kyle, I'm like, Kyle, Din is going to end up shooting him because he's going to go for his gun. And immediately that happened. Because it was like, it was that trope. It was that's what happens in these things, right? Like, the guy gives up. Yeah. And then he would run away. He'd put down his gun and he'd run away like instantly. But no, he wasn't that kind of guy. He made this big fuss about, oh, maybe your side will win or maybe my side will win, which really felt kind of like the DJ speech from TLJ. A little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. He was kind of that character, yeah.
But then on the other side of the wall, literally in like the samurai garden, was like more of a martial artist fight.
Yeah, a lot of people were comparing it to like Kill Bill.
Which was, it's an okay comparison if you're just talking about two women fighting in a martial arts style. But, and two older women as well.
But which was, refreshing to see.
Yeah, no, it was definitely refreshing to see. I think
my nitpicks about it is like, you don't fight with a spear that way. Like, I think I tweeted out the scene from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon where we have the two main women fighting. One is fighting with a sword, one is fighting with a spear, and you use the pokey end to poke it in the other person. You don't use it like a quarterstaff. And it felt to me odd, you know.
I mean, I thought that too when they were fighting. I thought, for one, I thought it was strange that the woman actually had actually stood against Ahsoka. I was like, how could you stand against Ahsoka? Like, how can you fight that well with this random weapon? And I felt odd that we didn't have any kind of understanding of who this woman was at all. We didn't
other than she was politically and like economically powerful. That's what we've learned, and that she's
economically. And then all of a sudden she's
very
fighting.
Bitter. Yeah, she was a very bitter human, right?
And typically, like you don't have to have a villain do all of that. Like, they don't have to be all of those things. In order to be threatening. Oh,
but in Star Wars, women have to be everything.
Exactly. And these are my qualms.
This is a complaint we'd like to register.
Like, why is it that, like, the men can be leaders or they can be fighters, right? Or if they're both, they typically are not both smart in a book sense and smart in a, you know, like they choose which skills to give the men.
It would be cool if she was just sitting on her chair eating grapes or something, letting a professional woman fighter, even, hey, let's hire another woman for this show, fight for her. I felt like that might have felt better.
Or like a woman droid. That'd be really cool.
Yeah,
because she had droids that like worked for her and stuff. Like, but you know, this is my like weird imagination taking control of like what I want to see. I want to see weird stuff. Like, why do they have to have it? It doesn't land right when you tell, you know, women that they have to be everything. They have to be both strong and smart and in control in order to be important to the story. You know, and we've gotten this over and over and over again. We don't get anything that's not that.
I mean, Clone Wars had the cat people. I forget their names, but she was the like queen of them, and she was not strong. She didn't know how to fight. She was just powerful. She controlled people, and she had lots of slaves and lots of like her whole empire.
It's really just in this show. Like, it's elsewhere in Star Wars, we've seen different types of characters that have interesting and like, you know, multi-dimensional characters, but then this particular show, the women keep showing up in this like this whole mother maiden crone thing.
They have to be everything to everybody.
Yeah,
it's odd.
Yeah, especially when Filoni writes it that way as well, and you're like, come on. We can do better. We know we can do better. Like, please.
There was also like a serious Princess Mononoke vibe the whole time. But I mean,
God, yes. Yes, that really got under my skin, because I actually watched that movie recently for the first time, and I was very much thrown for a loop, because I was like, I know this is where it's coming from, because I know Filoni is a fan of this story. Like, I know that he knows what this is. Like, you know, Avatar: The Last Airbender took notes from that story. Like, that is, it's such a classic. It's so, there's such a standard.
The nature versus civilization, you know, question in that. And nature fighting back.
But the biggest difference, right, in Princess Mononoke is that the people loved their queen. They loved the woman that led them. Mm-hmm. Like, regardless of the fact that she was doing bad things for the environment. So the question, the conflict in Princess Mononoke was not between the people. It was between all people and their relationship to the nature, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was like this overarching thing. And it didn't matter what the people did. Like, every single person was wrong. Every single person in that movie did something bad. Mm-hmm. And that was like the overarching plot. So it's very funny because Star Wars has a very similar message in its overarching plot. Every single person can do wrong. Everything that you do, every action has a good consequence and a bad consequence. And yet, like, they didn't play with that. And that wasn't even, they didn't even come close to that. They just said, oh, magistrate bad because Ahsoka says she's bad.
Yeah.
And Ahsoka good.
we see, like, she's like, hey, how many people you want to die here? I'm mad at you for, like, trying to come at me.
Killing my people.
Yeah.
No. Let's look at this from a totally neutral perspective.
Yeah.
Ahsoka is literally killing people.
I know.
Killing them.
She does not seem like a good person if you didn't know she was a Jedi. So she's relying on the persona of being a Jedi and being, like, because she leans into it, and like the magistrate's like, go kill that Jedi, and Din's like, yep, gotta go kill that Jedi, wink. And it's like, no, don't wink, she's been killing my people, like, you know.
Yeah, she's been killing my people. And then on top of that, like, you know, she hesitates, and she's like, you know, the magistrate says, are you sure you want to sacrifice these people? And then Ahsoka responds in this very peculiar way and is like, they are already suffering under your rule.
Yeah, it's like, what?
Are you sure that you want to, like, keep sacrifice? Like, these people are being crucified, right? That's the symbolic.
That was the symbolic parallel there. Yeah.
And Ahsoka's fine with it because it's an end game thing for her.
It's a means to an ends?
Yeah.
Wow. Jedi? No. Okay. Whoa. And that's where I wanted to, like, call in the parallels to a Ronin, right? So Ronin are masterless samurai. Either their master has died and they haven't pledged to a new master yet, or they are out on their own, and sometimes they become mercenaries, or they have their own code of honor that they are sticking with. It feels like Ahsoka with this lens is, like, lost, you know, to what I said earlier. Like, it doesn't feel like she has true purpose, but it also could be that we just don't see that in this episode because they didn't give it to us. But they didn't give it to us, and so we cannot care about that. And that means that we don't have context, and we don't have weight, and we don't have meat to the story.
Exactly.
Sigh. Right?
Sigh.
So they gave us a Ronin, but the Ronin doesn't feel right in the moment. The motivation feels weird. Like, she's just this war machine of destruction. But for what purpose? Just for information? You killed all of those guards, and you killed all of those people just for information for a guy that some people may not recognize. That gives us no context as far as why that was important to you and what was the emotional weight of that decision. And speaking of that guy, that was Thrawn, Grand Admiral Thrawn. So, of course, this is post-Empire. As far as we know, he's riding a Purgle somewhere with Ezra. We don't know. We don't know where he is.
Yeah, I think that bothered me so much because, again, I haven't really watched like some of the animated stuff, like with like Rebels and whatnot. I've read the Wikipedia though so many times, and it's so complex. Like, even if you've read it like 1,000 times, like, you're like still like, okay,
you gotta kind of watch it, yeah, to get it. Yeah.
So, like,
I am a recent Thrawn convert with the new Chiss Ascendancy series.
Right. I've seen y'all talk about that a lot.
It's so good. So I'm interested in this. I like Thrawn in the cartoon and Rebels as well. I thought he was really good. He's very deliberative and slow, and Sherlock in space. Sherlock Holmes in space. But
yeah,
it's fine. I'm interested in this story, but, like, why does this matter to Ahsoka? And thus, what is the conflict with Din because this matters with Ahsoka? None of that was there.
It's too much. It's too many layers. It's too many layers of. It's too many journeys, and it's too many storylines that are intersecting for no reason other than to provide that fan service and provide those Easter eggs.
I mean, or just like one of my struggles with Clone Wars season 7 was that, Bad Batch arc felt like a pilot. Parts of, the last episode felt like a pilot. Like, are all of these just pilots for future shows? And I don't want that to be the case. I want them to be able to stand on their own and have lead-ins if the desire strikes us. But is that what the Boba Fett reference was at the end of the episode 1? Is that what this is? I am not comfortable with that.
No. No. And the Boba Fett thing should have absolutely come back and have been a part of the series, a part of the season. Absolutely.
It's just a post-credit scene then, like Marvel does. And Star Wars is not Marvel.
No.
Star Wars is not the MCU. Although Beskar is looking more and more like vibranium. And I have troubles with that. I like the fact that it takes almost a holy armorer, a spiritual priestess of war, to forge it. That's really cool. And that's spiritual. That's really interesting. There's ritual around it. Okay, keep that. I like that. That makes it different. Do not turn it into vibranium. Please, 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 please. Do not turn this into superheroes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please, 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 please.
All right, let's go into the mythic and symbolic pieces because there actually were some really cool, meaty chunks in amidst all of this. The episode was watchable for me, certainly. It confused me. And that's a struggle when you end up being confused while you're watching a show.
Yeah, definitely.
For me personally. If you loved it, awesome. Let's go into the mythic stuff.
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. There's an overarching thing that is building and has cemented finally with the existence of Beskar being a defense mechanism against lightsabers. Why is this important? Oh, the symbolism of sword and shield.
Yeah. It's the binary in the story.
It is.
I love binaries because it tells us, it gives us the two sides of the coin and it shows us where we can expect to find the middle path. So there's something going on with these symbols, definitely.
Definitely. And just to remind us of where, light side force users, Jedi, Yoda reminds us that a Jedi uses the force for knowledge and defense, never for attack, right? He also has told Ezra, it's how Jedi choose to fight. In this episode, just removing all other knowledge of what we've seen in the series so far, but really just looking at what we see from a Jedi and Mandalorian lens. We see a Jedi who attacks and a Mandalorian who defends. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the opposite of our assumptions when we widen that lens to what we know of the story in general? Mandalorians attack and Jedis defend. They are peacekeepers. They are defenders of the Republic previously. They are defenders of the innocent and the lost and everything. What is going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fascinating. I'm excited about this.
Yeah. I do like this because this is something that we've assumed for a long time, but we never got a really good, clear representation of it happening physically in the show, and now we do.
We saw it in the forest when she comes down with both of her lightsabers onto his arm, onto his bracer, onto his bracer.
Yeah. There's a scene in the first season where I think it's he's asked to give up his weapons, and he says that a Mandalorian, they're a part of me or something. I can't remember the exact line.
I'm a Mandalorian. My weapons are my religion.
Yeah, my weapons are my religion, exactly. So there's this idea with the Mandalorians that they are their weapons and they are an offensive group of people. They're an offensive people. And then as we learn more about them, as season 1 goes on, we learn that they are very much protectors and they take in people who don't have anyone to protect them. And then, you know, the Jedi, I would say this is where they're failing, but like there is a chance to show that the Jedi are the opposite. Yeah. I think we can insinuate this from everything we've seen.
Well, we saw it in this microcosm of this episode, right?
Right, but it's just not very clear. Like, yeah, like the Jedi do not necessarily adopt; they steal, and they take. So it's the opposite of what the Mandalorians do.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know. It's kind of cool. I'm super interested to see this explored and almost turn on its head what we assume we know about Jedi and Mandalorians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like all of this is like I don't think this is all going to be solved with this series. I don't think like the faults of the Jedi are all going to be solved. I think there was a chance for it to be, but I think it's very clear now they're not going in that direction, and they're going to just focus on like the Mandalorian plot, which, okay, fine. I can see that now. But it will be interesting because what happens with the Mandalorians has already been set up as, an opposite, a yin yang type of relationship with whatever the Jedi are.
Yep.
And that's very interesting. So whatever happens to the Mandalorians, even if the Jedi are never mentioned ever again in the series, it's going to tell us what the creators think of the Jedi.
Yep.
In a meta way, maybe.
In a meta way, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even subconsciously.
Even subconsciously, yeah, exactly. I think so.
And it is something that they have used. They have used guided imagery, and so they do plug into the subconscious as far as something that they do use to create. Yeah. So it's interesting. Sure. I think that it's very clear that they see the Jedi as like, or at least the Mandalorians as more honorable and, you know, codes and have purpose, etc., which is fascinating to see in and of itself.
I always like that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like personally, it makes me long for medieval Star Wars.
Right.
Jedi Knights and Mandalorians in armor. Let's see that. I want that. Thank you. So go way, way, way back in the past before any of this matters and tell us the story. In general, there is a big symbolic meaning behind industrialization and the use of, natural resources. Ahsoka lives in the forest and comes out of nature to attack the city complex. That's very classic in, the witch that lives in the woods and attacks the city, or Avatar: The Last Airbender when the spirits of nature possess Aang and he attacks the city, or tries to calm the spirits of nature. Also very Lord of the Rings with Isengard and the Uruk-hai creation machine and the Ents that come to destroy the Isengard factory there.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, in the two towers. There's a lot of general metaphors of, okay, digging too deep into the earth is something that will cause nature to lash back. And Ahsoka being part of the Force, one with the Force, she is the instrument of the Force, right? It is her job to do what the Force wants her to do. The Force being created by all living things means the Force is unhappy with the situation that has happened there, generally speaking.
Yeah, true.
What did you think of Magistrate Morgan Elsbeth's name?
Yeah, I love it. Like, somebody else pointed out that her name was Morgan, which was so funny because it like it went in line with what we were talking about when we were talking about Corvus and the British and Irish implications, like in the lore of like Celtic mythology versus Arthurian mythology. And that was like very, very interesting. So like you could almost see
it felt on point, but it also felt like somebody had taken a person's named Morgan Elizabeth and cut out the I.
Yeah.
And said, and I cut out the I and the A and said, oh, it's Morgan Elsbeth. So if we find out at some future point that Dave knows somebody who's named Morgan and or Elizabeth, we will know where the name came from.
I really, really like her as a character. I wish that there was more meat there as far as like what was the conflict and why was she elite? Like, I mean, not saying that we always get that from Star Wars. I know that sometimes there are just like one-off villains, but I do wish that
and like
this had more.
Why is Thrawn her master?
Yeah,
I mean,
well, there's something with
like
the
there's something there.
Well, there's somebody pointed out apparently one of the droids had the symbol on them. So, but that doesn't tell us anything about who she is, and that doesn't tell us anything about like what she wants as an individual. And to me, like that's what Star Wars is. Like these people are not just goons. They don't just accidentally get wrapped up in these criminal enterprises and accidentally get, stuck with someone like Thrawn. You make a series of decisions based on your personality and your needs and your wants. And we didn't get any of that. We didn't hear what she needed or wanted or anything like that. So I really liked her as a character, and I think like she had a lot of symbolism that was on her and around her. And I loved the fact that she even had like the kind of like round buns on her head. I think there were so many things, like the fact that she was like patiently waiting at the koi pond when Din showed up. That was very intimidating. I really appreciated that because she didn't need to even be holding a weapon. She was holding food, right? Feeding the dark fish. It was very interesting. She was very interesting as a character, and like there was a hint in the very beginning of her actually caring about her people. And I thought for a second, I was like, ooh, it'd be really cool if it was like a Princess Mononoke thing where you find out that, she does care about them and, maybe they care about her too. But then of course that didn't really happen, and Ahsoka was right. Yeah, whatever. But like, there was nothing that happened with her character that was like surprising or unexpected. It was just very cut and dry. But there was a lot of potential there. So
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We got to see a conver, so it looked like an owl, but it had a longer tail. And yeah, it looked like a normal owl. It was definitely brown and spotted, which means it was a normal conver, not a force owl, the Morai, which is Ahsoka's special owl. But it was nice to see the owl there. We also got to see several Lothcats in the alley freak out. And I'm like, Dave, can't go anywhere without your Lothcats.
Yeah.
It was nice. It's nice to see repetitive, wise owls and women together. And what I mean by that is that the armor has a helmet that has, is very Athena-like, which it looks very similar to an owl, the owl eyes, right? This is the type of a helmet that both her and Bo-Katan and Sasha Banks' character, I don't remember the name. Sasha Banks' character in the third episode this season all have, right? And that's all wisdom. And but it's these are all women of war. Yeah. Right. And that's I think that's really interesting to thread this symbolism through the whole series.
Yeah, definitely. They're not shying away from that. I do think that maybe Filoni went back and wanted to add the owl in as like an Easter egg. I think that's a good Easter egg. I think if you're going to do Easter eggs, like that's a good one to do.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. And it gave people something to talk about. Everyone's like, Morai, like, you know, it's not, but it's fine that like we're having that conversation. It's good reminder that is associated with her character. Mm-hmm. So it's good that he reminds us of that. If that indeed was his decision, which I do think it was. It's just a little too specific.
Yeah, or it could have been like, hey, do you want an owl? Do you want the Morai here? Because I know they're seeing Ahsoka. And he would have been like, yes, not Morai. Make it just a regular conver, which I've named after my wife.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's something like that. He was fine with that symbolism and that being there as far as the world, right?
Right.
Let's go into Grogu.
Yes. Oh my god. Yeah.
We didn't really talk about his like all his background reveal. Do you want to go into that after you talk about what his name means?
Sure, because I like not to bring out the poison again, but yeah, I have issues about his whole backstory too. But yeah, no, I'll talk about the positive note. On the positive note, though, like his name it's absolutely brilliant because I mean, like Grog, you know, doesn't really have much meaning in terms of this story. But Goo, you know, because Grogu is such a weird name, but like Goo as a name in the Chinese context means to care for. Like it's a very popular name. It's like, I think it was like ranked like number 8 in terms of surnames. Now, typically, to remind you, like this could absolutely mean nothing intentionally because like Goo is a surname, so it would appear before. So it would be like Goo Grow if they were going with the Chinese, you know, naming convention. But I think that from a Western perspective, if we're just looking for like an etymology, like some kind of meaning in a name, this is where you would find the meaning, you know? Like you're not finding it in Grog, you're finding it in Goo. So I really like it.
It's literally growing to care for.
Yes, it means growing like to care for. That's what it means.
To care for.
Yeah. If you want to parse out like what was the conversation had around the writer's table, that's probably what it was.
It's really cool.
I think it's really cool, yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that it has a Spaceballs parallel to Yoda being yogurt, and now you can say this is Grogurt. I love it. It's so good.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I love it. I do want to talk about his background, and I know that you're going to go into salt for a minute, but I'm actually going to try. I'm going to try to temper down the salt. Add a little sugar into your salt so that it's not. It's like salted caramel instead of like anything else. Okay, so traditionally, when we have a very innocent character who is on a journey with a more experienced character, we see this so much in Asian dramas, and it's actually a trope like in other areas. Like we see it primarily reflected in like female characters, but typically they're the innocent character. When a person has lost their memories, they slowly start to regain their sense of self. They were somebody who was somebody, even, momentarily. Grogu was definitely a baby in the Jedi Temple, right? Not a youngling, not holding a lightsaber, nothing like that. Still in the nursery type situation. But when they have hidden or forgotten memories, part of their personalized journey is to uncover and retrieve those memories.
Mm-hmm.
It is how we show them growing. The best Star Wars example that we have seen of this is Cal Kestis in Jedi Fallen Order, as he recovers all of his training and all of his knowledge of the Force, and he remembers who he is through his found memories.
Yes.
So that's what's happening with Grogu. They're making this like recovering of who you are as part of a journey into the self. And in that respect, I'm fine with it. How it is framed in the episode is awkward and leaves a bitter taste of ash in my mouth. There.
I think that's my issue with it too. So I'm not even going to salt at all.
See, salted caramel.
There's no reason to. Yeah.
Salted caramel. There you go.
Great idea. Executed poorly.
Yeah, odd. Like, but it has in-universe like parallels to Cal, to this concept of uncovering memories and reclaiming who you are and working through your trauma. And this child has trauma. It is something we have seen before in universe, and it has worked very, very well for especially the story of Cal in Jedi Fallen Order. It is one of the best Star Wars stories out there. I highly recommend it if you haven't played the game or checked out the YouTube videos of it. It's really, really good. Yeah. But it's a valid approach for Baby Yoda. I just wish they had framed it differently. Sorry, Grogu. I just wish they had framed it differently, because it can be a wonderful discovery of self, working through past traumas and recovering and owning who you are, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I also didn't like the fact that like this other character who had just met him was revealing all of this.
Yeah.
It felt so like
if
cold.
If it was anybody other than Ahsoka, would we have believed them? I don't know.
If they were like, okay, okay, I just want to provide some weird imaginative thing. Like, what if it would have been like Frog Lady and her husband, or like one of their frog children that would have been like, I don't know, like would have said, oh yeah, no, I speak his language. This is his name.
Yeah.
And, like, what if that could have opened up the gates to a whole conversation of what happened
the past,
to him?
Yeah.
It didn't have to be Force-related. I mean, it's nice that that's, like, there's, like, that sense of magic there. But there's a sense of magic in, like, connecting with another species that you once ate the eggs of, you know? Like, there's other ways to do this. And there's other ways that were already set up. It didn't have to be her. And I'm so sick of telling that to people. I'm so sick of having to say, like, it didn't have to be Ahsoka. There was no reason for it could have been anything. I just wish.
I mean, the only reason, again, I went into it earlier, was because of the trauma that we understand about the character, and it makes the most sense from a personal perspective. If she is Falstaff for Dave Filoni.
But this, and I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say this. I don't want to, but I'm going to. This fandom needs to, like, accept that there is not one way to tell a story.
Yes.
There are plenty of ways. There are thousands of ways to tell a story that has the exact same message. And they keep choosing this one way, and everyone keeps defending it, saying this is inevitable. This is, of course, this is how they're going to tell the story. Well, that's not fair, because there are thousands of ways to go about this. We need to demand more and better. And, you know, if somebody has a criticism, if somebody has like something, hey, this is how I would do it, listen to them and say, hey, that is actually really creative. That's very imaginative, or I didn't think about it that way. Or, you know, like I've done that before. I've been proven wrong before by this fandom because I didn't imagine a different way. I saw something I thought was inevitable, and somebody convinced me that it wasn't inevitable, because the world is not small. The world is huge and is filled with possibility, and the world of Star Wars is filled with so much possibility.
So I think
off
I
of
said
my
this.
soapbox.
Oh, it's a beautiful soapbox. So this is something I think I said last episode, and I know that Jon Favreau is Dave Filoni's apprentice in that he is learning the world of Star Wars from him and from his lens, etc. But who is the young up-and-comer that is Dave Filoni's, the Dave Filoni to George Lucas for Dave Filoni? Who is the young person that is bringing in the fresh ideas and challenging Dave Filoni?
Who?
No
Favreau?
one.
Oh,
No, it can't be Favreau. Favreau is more experienced in storytelling in a live action perspective than Jon Favreau or than
So you're
Dave
saying
Filoni.
you're saying that Filoni needs an apprentice.
I think that Dave Filoni needs a younger woman apprentice
I agree.
because he would learn, much like Joseph Campbell did, by his students in his later life, all about the goddess, all about the challenging factors. Dave Filoni needs a younger woman apprentice, much like his Ahsoka and how Anakin needed Ahsoka.
Yeah.
In my opinion. I hope that happens. Okay, on to moon symbolism.
Speaking of, on to moon symbolism.
Moons, particularly in this episode, represent femininity.
Yes.
Right? We have two massive moon symbols, and there might be more, like I might have missed them, but there's this moment where Ahsoka is speaking with Grogu in the light of the lamp, and I really hope that the people that said that Ahsoka and Baby Yoda back in the past that they were dyads, I hope they take a screenshot of this and put it next to the Reylo over the campfire holding hands. I really hope they make that parallel just so I can have a giggle. They are not a dyad. It is not a thing. I really hope they do that because it's really funny.
It is.
Because it was like a lamp or a lantern or something, but the moon in the background is really fascinating. It's about half full, and light and dark, and that symbolism in itself is to say it's in progress of changing. Mm-hmm. It is in transformation, and it's fascinating that way. Interesting, because it's like, it kind of goes back to, the yin-yang symbols in this show are pretty, important. They're very severe. Yes. But, also, within the previous episode with the red and blue symbolism, mm-hmm. and how, everything, when it starts to change, everything can change rather rapidly. That's very interesting. Okay, so it's actually, maybe 60% full. Interesting. It's okay, that's interesting. So did it? Okay. So is the full side on the left where she's sitting? She is on the dark side, and the full side is, or the light side is on Grogu's side. Okay. It had to be intentional because this is all. It's all CGI. Moment. It's all CGI. They had to create that moon. Somebody had to make a decision. How full is that moon? Yeah. Right? So it's actually in progress of transition. If it was at 50%, it would have meant something. If it was full, it would have meant something. If it was a crescent moon, it would have meant something. It is moving towards a full moon, which means full goddess. Right. It is in transition to full goddess. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and it's so cool because it also goes along with the symbolism on the magistrate's head with her little crescent moon, and there's a little tiny dot below it, right? Yeah. Tiny dot below it, but the dark crescent moon, which totally reminds me of the Dark Lady from Sailor Moon, with the dark crescent, when Chibiusa gets aged up.
But that's so true. Yeah.
But the dark moon, the crescent moon can mean like that specific moon on that side, like that moon, if you were to turn it on its side, is like the crone, is that age of life, because this all ties back to the triple goddess symbol. The crescent on one side, which is early life, you are, a maiden or an acolyte. The middle, which is that you're a fully realized goddess of creation, essentially. And then the final one, which is that you are a mentor, a sage, or a crone. You've experienced life enough, but also having it be black is really fascinating and kind of shows from it is almost the blackness that is in the moon behind Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Not quite, but like, because it's a little bit more crescent. The white is further along, and it makes me question what this woman represents. If this was purposeful, is there a symbolic reason behind it? I really hope so. That would be really cool. I'm not going to put any stock into it if it doesn't end up symbolically meaning anything. It's interesting, both like very powerful female characters in this episode have moon symbolism around them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Seems to mean like they understand the symbols, but are maybe not like going with them 100%. Or we'll see.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's talk about spears.
Spears. Yeah, this was kind of a nice touch, especially like with it being made of Beskar, and like it was a nice continuity with everything else is, going on with his armor and whatnot. It's like, oh yay, something that continues the story in a way that doesn't like actually fulfill the plot, but it's like,
oh, it's totally a boon. This is totally a boon.
It's a boon that feels like connected, though. Like, yeah, it actually feels connected.
This is connective tissue, yes. And nice. Why is it important? It's because he finally has a weapon to fight Gideon.
Yeah, I like that.
Because it can go against lightsabers. We've seen it in action. This is a Chekhov's saber instead of a Chekhov's gun. It's a Chekhov's spear.
Which again kind of annoys me because it's like, I feel like they only did the fight so they could show that it could stand up to 2 lightsabers, right? She disarmed her. Like, the magistrate disarmed Ahsoka of 1 lightsaber. And it's like, oh, did you really just use that to show us that, like, this thing can actually stand up against lightsabers?
I mean, I'm fine with that.
It's fine, but
the magistrate and Ahsoka needed more meat. Right? More skin in the game for this fight to mean something, because just like pew pew, right? Lightsaber fights and physical, I'm doing hand to hand or weapon to weapon combat in Star Wars is the emotional climax of a conflict.
Yeah.
Or exactly. It should be. It's like a musical climax song.
Yeah,
it's how people resolve. Like, think of like any sort of conflicting fight in Star Wars where lightsabers are typically involved. It's the emotional climax. Mm-hmm. The lightsabers help them resolve that fight.
And there was nothing built up and nothing to resolve with Ahsoka at that moment.
That we knew about, right? She had reasons, but that's not having quote unquote reasons that we're not aware of as the audience doesn't have us emotionally invested in the outcome.
Right. Because like in every one of these fights, like again, this is the expected versus unexpected like kind of turn that everything takes. You go in thinking you want something. You go in saying, I need this information. I need to defeat this villain, whatever. And then you come out understanding something about yourself that you didn't expect to retrieve. And that did not happen in any way. And again, this is like something that's in Star Wars. This is not just in myth, and it's not just in like story. This is in Star Wars. We've seen it happen over and over again. So why are we missing it?
They needed one scene added to this with something, and it could have given so much context to this episode. So spears, generally speaking, of course, are phallic. They represent masculinity and directiveness. They have direction because they're arrow-like, and they can also fly. They're symbolically saying to the audience, I finally know where I'm going. Right? And guess what happens?
The meta of spears.
the meta of spears, right? And they're also, when put into the ground, a way of marking territory. They are assertive. They are, direct, full of direction. They have a lot of religious connotations, specifically with the spear of destiny and the Christian belief in Longinus, and how he needed to do evil so that Jesus could be resurrected. There's a lot of stuff to do with that.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the spear of destiny itself is like a holy object that has its own powers, and because of cutting open the side of Christ, it ended up becoming kind of like a relic and a magical weapon with its own mythos around it itself.
Right. Because of what it pierced. Yeah.
Because of what it pierced. Odysseus also was a spear wielder, which is another parallel to Odysseus that we have found in this show, which is kind of cool.
Love it.
And when he returned home, he killed one of the suitors of his wife with a spear. So that would be really cool to see him use that spear, protectively, etc.
Yeah. And an emotional climax of sorts.
Yes. And we don't know if he can even use his spear if he's trained. So it's kind of like a cool unknown. But I absolutely do think the Chekhov's gun in the room is that this is meant to fight Gideon.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it.
I like it. I'm like, there's a spear. And you're like, yeah, there is a spear. Yeah, our texts are so weird throughout the day. Okay, let's talk about...
I liked it. Did you like the name? I liked it. What about this? I did not like that.
I did not like that. And we promise to treat all of these episodes, as best as we can, whether we like it or not, and dig into what we see from a symbolic perspective and, lament potentially, lost opportunities that we see. But we are enjoying the show in general. And I love getting the symbolic meaning, all of the symbolic meaning out of this show as much as I can.
Yeah, and I do enjoy. I immensely enjoy the conversations online that I've been having with people about this, and I also really, 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 at the end of the day, I love Mando Fridays because I love digging into the what is there, and just asking why. Yeah, and even when I'm frustrated, at the end of the day, I still have to record this with MC, and I still have to I have to write the summary, and I have to watch the episode at least 2 times. And, by the time I do that, I sit down and I say, okay, there's still something going on here, and it's still really interesting to me. So that's why I'm still interested. And I kind of, I feel bad for people who have the similar reactions to me and walk away from the show. Because I would have if I wasn't, if I weren't, a part of the fandom in the way that I am, and if I weren't, if I weren't doing this, I probably would have walked away from it because I don't I'm not very committed to watching things. That's just
I know. I was surprised you said yes to doing the show with me. So
yeah, I'm really not. I'm not committed, especially I don't do weekly watches. This is just not something I do. But yeah, I think that that's even more of a reason why I feel like this is it. There is a failure of sorts on the writers. Is like you're losing people because you would have lost me because I would have been a casual watcher and I would have dropped it. So that's what hurts, and I think that that's something to take into consideration. Even if you loved this, even if you loved every single episode, like it's something to remember that it's not surviving casual audiences.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Is it too confusing for people week to week? I don't know. I am not a casual viewer. I am a very intense viewer. I am a very high expectation viewer. And for the most part, like there's enough food there for me to eat. But is the packaging is what I would like it to be? It's kind of awkward and odd sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
And that's disappointing for me personally because I want people to be like, yes, I enjoyed this food. And I'm like, can you imagine? There's all this other stuff behind this food. Look at all the artistry and the spices. And I don't know why I'm doing food metaphors all the time now, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, on to next episode / where they're headed because, you know, we don't know if it'll be next episode. Tython itself is in the inner core. It is a core world. He is in the outer rim, right? The farthest away from, if there's a bright point to the center of the galaxy, you're on the planet that it's farthest from. Well, there's lots of planets that are way out there, Luke. You know, he's going from the outer rim to the inner core. He's got a tracking beacon on him. You know, will he actually make it to Tython next episode, or will that be the climax of the show? He finally gets there. I don't know. I think it could be the climax of the show. He puts, you know, Grogu climbs up on the little, you know, top of the mountain, very spiritual, going to the top of a mountain to meditate with the universe. There's a lot going on there. And when we see it, we'll have more from a symbolic and meaning perspective to dig into. But that's cool. So he's got to go and sit on top of the Seeing Stone. You know, you go and look at this. This planet has a ton of legends history and has recently been recanonized into the story. So cool. It has some like Sith background, it has some Jedi background, it has all this kind of cool stuff. Dr. Aphra went there recently in the Dr. Aphra comic, but it is a nexus of power. It is a vergence in the Force. Where have we seen vergences in the Force before, Ty?
Oh, at Doors to the World Between Worlds.
Mortis, the world between worlds, the temple in Lothal, Anakin himself. So here's the cool thing about vergences in the Force. It means that you can literally go into the Force and we might get a version of, you know, what ended up being the world between worlds for Ezra for Grogu. They might call it the world between worlds. I'm not sure what they'll do, but it will be Grogu's version of this. We see Cal kind of do it when he meditates. We saw Ezra do it before he ended up going into the world between worlds on Lothal. You know, we saw kind of Anakin's version of it in Mortis, this very psychological realm that could exist for Grogu. I'm very excited about the possibilities of being freaking weird. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
And like, let's give me weird Force stuff, please. Thank you. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I want to see a puppet in a dark realm. I want to see how they do this with CGI and puppetry. Like, that would be epic.
I think they're puppeting him walking.
Yeah.
When he walked down the ramp, I think he was puppeted walked. Like there's a puppet situation going on. I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're still very dedicated to that craft, which is awesome. Like there's some areas where they're splitting it with CGI, but I think it's very well done. And they're like respecting the art of it, which I really like. And they should be, because they have the resources to be able to do it.
The puppet is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to see I want to see the puppet walk on some kind of we know it's not going to be okay. Ezra Bridger, our whole idea about that was like you said, it was Bridges because his name was Ezra Bridger. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
also, interestingly, this is something Kyle brought up this week. Out of nowhere. I have no idea if he read it on the internet or whatever. Okay, Ezra Bridger, right? What do bridges do? Allow you to walk across the sky.
Skywalking. Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. That's cool, hey?
This is new.
So I don't know what Grogu's gonna exactly be, but in the I got the poster book randomly sent to me. It was lovely. There's all these cool posters, and randomly in one is Grogu in a Dagobah swamp.
Right. Yeah,
I think that would be really cool if he visited a bunch of cool places.
Oh, what if he visited
Dagobah and
yeah,
all these other places?
Interesting.
I don't know what they'll do, but it's cool to speculate. What do you think Grogu's experience inside of the Force will be? I'll leave you with that.
It's a journey to oneself, whatever that will be, whatever that could be.
Into the self and into the universe. Because they are the same thing. They are the same thing. Okay. Any final thoughts?
Blah. I'm just really, I'm not, when I went back and I watched it again, I was really, really, really happy with how pretty everything looked. And so I just, I very much appreciate what they're trying to do. I just do. I want to demand more, and I should demand more. And the fans deserve more. The fans deserve new and different and exciting and challenging storylines. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and I felt like that was echoed kind of amongst some of the people that we typically follow on Twitter. And I just want to say, I look at story with a very demanding lens, but that's okay.
Yeah.
When it works, it is absolutely spectacular, though.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Ty, thank you for joining me for this chapter.
Once upon a time in the Outer Rim. We should come up with the theme song. A really badly sung theme song.
I've never listened to the intro music that was scored by Christy Carew.
No, I mean lyrics. Let's come
lyrics?
up with lyrics.
Oh.
We'll come up with it with Christy's music, and it'll be really bad. It would just be so bad. Oh no.
Well, I was actually I should probably do some sort of fairy tale version of the season, as the summary. I was oh, I should have done that, but I'm, I put we do so much research, you know, when we pull these episodes together that we want to do a good job, and that's where we put our effort into. So
yeah, we're not funny. And we're not I just want to say that back to that. Yeah, no, we're not very funny, and we're not that entertaining, but I hope we're kind of entertaining.
I think we're enjoyable, and we get amazing feedback that we make people think. And there were so many tweets today about how much stuff we got right. Ahsoka kind of being a nature spirit or a witch of the forest, who is angry, how close Din needs to carry the child and the weight of the child being part of the burden of his journey, things like that. There was some really interesting things that people immediately jumped on board. And also, we love you and thank you for being so interested in hearing from us right away.
Yeah, it's really nice. I'm just happy to be part of the conversation, honestly. I think, that's just it's really good. it feels really good. It's really fun. So
yeah, I'm really enjoying doing this with you, Ty. It's the highlight of my week to, after a long work week to get to do this. Definitely Mando Fridays is so fun.
Yeah, Mando Fridays is fun. There's a tiny little bit of anxiety every Friday morning when I wake up and I'm like, oh Lord, what's going to be in store today? But by the end of the day, it's always the same. It's always like really just glad to be a part of this and breaking it down with Marie Claire. I couldn't do it with a better person. So yeah, it's really nice.
Absolutely. And we know where Mando is headed. He's headed to have to be able to have Grogu choose his own path, right? Make his own choice, choose his own path, start his own journey, right? And through that, Mando will discover the importance of the Mandalorians, I believe.
Yeah. He'll have to start going on the journey of what it means to be a Mandalorian, I think. Yeah. Interesting. Yep. Cool.
Ty, where can people find you if they're looking for you online?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Wit and Folly, where I make videos about Star Wars and other types of pop culture media. You can also find me on Twitter at wit_folly, and you can find me on my personal Twitter at black_TYM.
Awesome. Thanks for coming out, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Brad, Cheryl Bell, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Felicia, How Rude, Anna Perez, Macau Mom, Neil, James, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Marvin. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or any podcast app. It helps other people find the show. Check out our other channel, What the Fiction, for non-Star Wars content. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, and our website, where we have expanded our content to include reviews, metas, and articles, whattheforce.ca. Or on our Discord, links are all in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.